Okay, hello and welcome to another tutorial. In today's class, we are going to look at compositing and this will be using SketchUp and Photoshop. Now, after having an idea of how compositing works, essentially it is combining 3D images with 2D images. That's the type of compositing that we'll be using. So the first thing that we'll need to have is to have completed our model for assignment 1. So if we actually take a look on the handout, we can see that this is what our model should look like. Now I have a completed model here. And this completed model is the one that we will use to do our compositing. Now, ideally, the first thing that we would want to do is ensure that we have everything correct on the model. And let's take a look on that reference image again. All right, so this is our model here. Let's take a look on that reference image. And you can see on the reference image that we have a nice background. We have this building in the water, but more importantly, it is perspectively accurate. We also have an entourage here. So in this case, it's a boat. So the first thing we need to do is to get our building at the correct angle. Now, to do this, we're going to use a couple features from our tray. So I'm going to actually pin that since we're going to be using it quite a bit. Now, we do want to ensure that we have our shadows enabled. Here we go. And also, we do want to get our background as well. Now, if you look on the handout, you will notice that there is actually a link here to access entourage and backgrounds and things like that. Let's click on that. And let's look at entourage components and look in the background folder. And from this folder, you can see, let's put this on 3D view here. You can see the different background options that we currently have. So we are going to choose, let's see this one here. This one here looks pretty good. That also looks nice. There's another one there. Another one there. Now, ideally, you must use a background from this folder, right? You cannot use your own background. So we're going to use this background and we're going to actually put this building in the water. Let's just look at the others that we have here. Okay. So if we look, if we click on the link in the handout, we'll be taken to a folder that has these different views, right? And the idea is that you want to place your building in a way that works with these views. So when selecting the view, you would want to keep an eye out for example, look at the perspective lines of a particular view so that you can determine how your building will be aligned. So for example, if you were to put your building over here, you know, look at the lines of the dock, and perhaps, you know, your building would perhaps be aligned something to that effect, you know. So you're gonna need to look at these lines here, and there are quite a bit of images, so you can select the one that best suits you. But remember, you need to have reflections, you need to have an entourage, whether it's a boat or a person, and the perspective needs to be aligned correctly. I'm going to select this image here, so I'm going to download this image, and this is what it looks like. And I am planning to place my building perhaps somewhere about here in this image. So when you're selecting an image, you know, just kind of picture where your building would be. All right, now the next thing that we want to do is, let's go back to SketchUp, and the first thing we need to do is to align our building to the background. Now how you do that is you need to head over to styles, and then you're going to go to edit, then head over to background, watermark, and you're going to click the plus to add a new watermark. Now you're going to look for where you downloaded the image, so here it is, and that watermark should just pop in our scene, and it should be semi-transparent, right? So notice it says you can do an overlay or a background. That's a background. So let's leave it on background and choose next. And we're gonna just leave this as is. Choose finish. Stretch to fit screen. You're gonna lock aspect ratio. Ensure that you do that. And you're gonna choose finish. So now what you're going to do is angle your building so that it lines up with the image, and you're going to do that by panning and zooming and just kind of getting the image just right. Now you also have to watch your perspective, because this image has, you know, the perspective is a little bit wider, I think. So I would go to view and camera, and go to field of view, and I'm able to just kind of change my perspective a little bit to better match the image here. Kind of push it up a little bit, and you can kind of see, look at how your lines are aligned to the image. You can use that to help determine how it would be. Now you can additionally decide to put your building on the opposite side here. Let's kind of orient that a little bit. Now, once you have your building roughly in place, you are gonna create a camera. Let's give another image a swing here, because some of you might choose another image that is a bit more challenging to align. This one is not so bad. Yes, let's look at this one here. So I'm going to download this image again, right? And I'm going to go back to SketchUp, and this time I'm going to choose a little minus there, so I'm going to delete in that background. I'm going to go to add, and I'm going to add this new background, and I'm going to do the same things that I did just now, where I'm going to go next and next and next, and there we go. Oops, actually I put it on blend. Let's edit that. I think we can edit that. Okay, let's remove it again and add it back. There we go. Yeah, we want to change this to background, right, so that it's in our background. There we go. So in this case, this one is a little more tricky to align. So remember, I was saying to watch your perspective lines. So if I do this like this, you would see that, okay, this is kind of okay. It perhaps want to come a little bit more that way. Then it perhaps wants to get a little bigger. So we're gonna zoom in a bit. Now, when you're doing this, remember that this is a flat image. So let's assume that we wanted to put the boathouse on this side beside the boat, right? So we want to do something like this. You know, let's say we want to do something like that. Well, of course, we're not able to put the house behind the boat because the boat is actually a part of the image. So what we have to do is we have to kind of imagine what it would look like behind the boat. And then we're gonna do that manipulation when we go in SketchUp. So maybe it would need to be a little smaller, not too small. You can also switch over to your view to X-ray. Not X-ray necessarily, but more, let's go to wireframe. There we go. So wireframe will kind of give you a better idea, you know, because you can see where the lines are lining up. So let's assume that we wanted to put it kind of something like that. Remember, you got to kind of ignore the boat in this case. I think that would be about it. Now, before you do anything, you want to save this view because you might spend some time trying to align this thing and you don't want to accidentally move the mouse. So we're going to save this view, we're going to go to camera. Well, we're going to go to camera and go to toolbars. And we want to turn on a toolbar called Advanced Camera Tools. Now, once you do that, that toolbar will look like this, or in some cases it will be horizontal. What you want to do is choose this first option, which will create a physical camera. Now, when you have the view like this, you're going to want to save your camera view in case you move the camera after spending so long to align it. And you're also going to want to save the style. If you remember when we spoke about styles, we have actually edited a style here, and to save our style, this style will have a background. We're gonna highlight this and we're gonna call it new background. So now there is a visual style that's called new background. So for example, if we change our style to, you know, one of these other styles here, we can easily just select back that new background style that we have saved, and it will load back. So what we want to do now, actually we need to, let's go further and edit this style here. We're going to go to, actually no, this is fine as is. This is actually fine. Now what we want to do is, let's go back to wireframe, and now we're going to use the advanced camera tools here. Now you find the advanced camera tools by going to view, toolbars, and you need to turn on the advanced camera tools right there. Now the advanced camera tools will allow you to create a camera, and that camera will hold this position while you move around and do other things. So for example, I can create a camera here. It's going to ask me to name that camera. I'm going to call it comp camera. All right, short for composition camera. I'm going to choose OK. So now this camera is here, and actually my view is actually locked to the camera now. Meaning that if I move around, then I am actually moving a camera. And how do I know this is happening? Well, there's an icon right here that will allow me to unlock the camera view. Unlock the camera view. So if I zoom out, then you can see that's my camera looking on my building. Now, if I can move around and do everything else, but if I want to get back the view that I had, I can simply click this button here to view through the camera. Pretty much like that. So I can always go back to this camera view. Now, this is important. If I uncheck that, then my view becomes unlocked. Now I know it is unlocked because when I click here, it says locked. And locked means that the camera is now locked into the view. So I can move around and I don't have to worry about moving the camera. The camera is always looking on the building. So if I click my go to view, it's gonna ask me which view do I want to go to, and it will go back to that view. So my view is saved. Now if I unlock, so notice you see locked here. If I unlock the view and I move it, now I'm actually moving my camera. So you might want to do this if you realize that something isn't quite right, and then you lock it again. All right, now once it's locked, I can move around and do other things that I want to do. So if, for example, you wanted to position maybe a person or make some edits to your building, you can go ahead and do that and not have to worry that you're moving your view. Okay, let me go back to the view now. There we go. Now the next thing that we want to do is we don't want to export this building with this kind of cartoon style. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually further edit this visual style. So we're going to go to edit, and we are going to go to edges, and we're going to actually turn off edges and profiles. So that will give us a little bit closer to a realistic look. Now remember that we're actually editing our style here. I've actually renamed my style to Landscape Architecture Style 3, but I'm actually modifying this style even further. So I would need to, well, the styles are automatically saved. So every time I go back to this style, it will load back everything. Actually, it's not fully automatic. You do have to update the style. So for example, if I turn on my edges and I want to update this new style now, I need to click this button here, and now my style is updated. If I want to turn off, you know, if I want to make any kind of modification, I need to always update this style. Now you can know that your style is saved because if I go back to select styles and I select a totally different style like that, I can go back to my Landscape Architectural Style 3 and everything should load back as how I had it. Right? So you save your camera, you save your styles, because you might want to come back to make some modifications and go back into Photoshop again. Now, our next thing you want to do is to also adjust your shadows. Right? Now, to do that, you're going to go over to shadows. There we go. Let's minimize styles. And when you go over to shadows, you might notice that if you want to get a different angle. All right, so notice that in my case the shadows are going this way, and I want to just kind of carry it down a little more. Let's make it a little longer that way. I think that is good. Let's carry it back a little bit. There we go. So I am liking those shadows. I can also set, you know, like the darkness of the shadows and so forth. Now you might realize that you are not really going to get shadows to look really realistic in SketchUp. So we're going to have to make some modifications when we go over to the Photoshop side. But at minimum, you should be able to extract your shadows, no problem. All right. So now that we have these things complete, we definitely would want to save our file. So I'm going to call it Assignment 1 Comp, short for composition. And now what I'm going to want to do now is to take this into Photoshop to do some more work. Now to do that, I'm going to want to save this, but without the image. Right? That's a key thing. I don't want the background in here necessarily. I rather have a transparent image, and then I can always modify the background in Photoshop. So to get out this image, first I'm going to actually turn off shadows, because I don't want the shadows right off the bat. I'm going to come back for the shadows later. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to go to Export 2D Graphic, and I'm going to export this, and I'm going to use this folder here, and I'm going to export this as a I want to export it as a PNG. I'm going to go to Options, make sure that I have a transparent background. But before I can get a transparent background, I actually need to turn off my background, because I don't want my background from SketchUp. So let me cancel that and go back into Styles and Edit, and I'm gonna go over to Background, to Watermark. All right, there we go. And I'm actually gonna delete this. Now I can always get back my style if I want, so it doesn't necessarily matter. I don't want a sky. And I mean, it doesn't matter what the color of the background is. You just want to ensure that your background is plain. I would go with a, I don't think it should matter, but let's see. Let's just leave the background as is. And then we're going to go to Export 2D Graphic again, but this time we're going to ensure that we choose PNG. And then under Options, we're going to make sure we choose Transparent Background. All right, and then we're going to choose OK and Export. And we're going to wait for SketchUp to generate this image. All right, now when you see the image is supposed to look like this. So there's nothing else in this scene but the background. Let me zoom in here. So that's a nice image there, and we're gonna now work some magic in Photoshop. Okay, now once you have Photoshop open, this time what we're going to do is we are actually going to open our background first in Photoshop. So we're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to find where we had that background. So I'm going to go to downloads, and that's the background that we got. Now it's important to open the background first, because the idea is that the background is going to be already aligned for us to the foreground. So now once the background is in, notice it comes in on a layer called background, and I'm actually using my layout for my workspace layout for DDM that we created early on in the course, right? So this is why this is what my workspace looks like. Now the first thing we want to do, we want to not use this as a background layer. We want to have this as a regular layer. So we're going to right click that and go to layer from background, and what that's going to do is turn it into a layer. So we're going to call this BG for background. All right, there we go. Now that it is a background, now what we want to do next is we want to drag our image that we created, or we're going to place it over it. We can use the place command. So we're going to go to place embed, right? For those of you who have a different version of Photoshop, you'll just get one place option. Doesn't really matter. So we're going to choose place embedded, and we're going to browse to where we have that image. Now this should drop exactly in position, or roughly in the same position, and then we are going to choose the OK button here. Now you could also drag your image in, doesn't necessarily matter. And once the image is in, notice it's going to come in as a smart object, and you know that because it has the smart object symbol that we saw from the early days. That's that little smart object signal there. But if you remember that the smart object is a layer, the smart layer is a layer that cannot be modified. So we don't want that. We want to be able to erase and do all kinds of stuff. So we're going to right click that, and we're going to say rasterize layer. So now we're able to edit that layer. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to need our shadows to come in to this composition, and a clever way that we can get that done is we could either save an image with the shadow, or we could guesstimate where the shadow would be, right? So those are your options. Now if you're feeling confident about drawing your own shadow, then by all means you would create a new layer, and we'll call that layer shadow. And with the layer called shadow, what you're going to do is you would now use your, there we go, our polygonal tool, polygonal lasso tool. Make sure that you're on the shadow layer, and we're going to actually just kind of draw in a kind of a rough shadow here, kind of like that. And we're just going to do like that. There we go. Then we're going to fill this with black, so ensure that your paint is set to black, and you're going to go to the paint bucket and fill. All right, next we need to actually deselect, so we're going to switch back to the lasso tool, right click and deselect. Now we need to put the shadow layer behind that layer, and there we have our shadow. And of course we can adjust the opacity of this shadow here. There we go. Now if you're not feeling confident about drawing your own shadow, you could save out an image that has the shadow from SketchUp, and then use that as a base to trace out the shadow, and then you can just delete that layer. But I'm pretty sure you guys should be able to confidently be able to trace out a shadow. All right, good. So I'm going to, now what we need to do, we obviously need to deal with this boat. The fact that this boat is actually, the building is obscuring the boat, but it should be the other way around. So let's turn off our shadow and turn off our building. Now, for those of you who might have objects that are supposed to obscure your rendering, or rather your 3D model, you're going to need to cut out that object and put it on a layer above. So in this case, the boat is doing that. So I'm going to actually cut out the boat. And I don't really need to cut out every aspect of the boat. So I'm using the polygonal lasso tool. And where it's getting too small, I'm actually going to use the plus button to kind of zoom in a little bit here. All right. Remember, you don't have to pan around. You can actually push your mouse towards the edge of the screen and it will kind of move that around for you. All right. Now notice in this case that even if I cut this out, I have these little spaces to deal with, but I'm going to come back and deal with that right afterwards, right? I'm holding space bar and left clicking to pan. Or I could have just pushed my mouse against the edge of the screen to pan. There we go. Now I'm going to cut this out here because the house is going to be in front of that. Now, depending on how much of your image is obscuring your boat, oops, I went too far there. I press backspace to undo. It will determine how much you need to cut out. Now, in this case, I'm actually just going to go ahead and cut out the entire boat, because I may want to move my building around at a later date. So I don't want to just cut out the exact areas. All right, good. Now, once that is done, I'm going to actually copy this. Edit, copy. I need to be on the background layer because this boat that I'm cutting out is on the background layer. So I have to ensure that I'm on the background layer. So I can go to edit and copy and edit. And I'm going to go to paste, special, and go to paste in place. That's important. Because when I do that, I'm actually just pasting a picture of the boat directly over the boat. Let me show you what I mean. If I turn off the background layer, I just have the boat by itself. There we go. So it was pasted directly on the boat. Now, if I turn on back my shadow and the building, then I would want this boat. I'm going to call this layer boat. And I would want my boat to be like that. Let's turn on back the background. There we go. And that is looking a bit more reasonable. Now, perhaps I need my shadow to be a little darker. We can mess with that. Additionally, I do believe this shadow is supposed to be a little obscured when it at this point here. Now you can really, that point here should be a bit more obscured. Now you can really get down and dirty in terms of how you want your shadows to be. If you are a person that is very particular about shadows, well, that is great because that will help you to for your buildings to come out looking, your compositions to come out looking more real. So in this area, this shadow should really kind of cut off at that point there. So let's actually do that. So we're gonna go to the shadow layer and we're gonna use our polygonal lasso tool, and we're actually gonna cut this out here, and I'm gonna hit delete. There we go. Now we've gotten rid of that shadow. So now that looks a little bit more realistic. You can see the shadow falling behind there. Now the other reason this doesn't look too real is there should really be some kinds of reflection that's happening here and possibly in the window. So we're gonna also do some kind of reflection as well. So we're gonna use the same concept that we used before, where we're gonna actually duplicate this layer. So there is the house, is that little building there. I'm gonna duplicate that layer. I'm gonna right click and choose duplicate. I'm gonna call this layer shadow, and I'm gonna put this sorry, not shadow, I'm gonna call it reflections, short REF. I'm gonna put it below, even below the shadow layer, and I'm gonna flip this around by just clicking the middle and just dragging it down. In some Photoshop I need to hold shift, so I gotta hold shift to drag it down and just kind of flip it the opposite way like that. Here we go. Then I want to kind of skew this into position, so we're going to use back some of these tools that we were familiar with. So we're going to go to edit, and then we are going to go to distort. Let's move that out of the way. So let's see if distort can do the trick. Let's see here. We actually want this to kind of be like that. And it doesn't have to be like perfect. It just needs to kind of look like it's, there we go, you know, it will take some amount of getting used to. Okay, so that will be our reflection. So we're going to choose OK on that one, so we're happy with that. Then of course we need to cut out the walkway section here, so we're going to do the same thing like we did with the boat. We're going to now go to our background layer, and let's actually turn everything off. Now look closely, when you have a lot of layers, look closely how you can turn everything off. You can just click the layer above, click and hold and drag, and that will pretty much turn off whatever the mouse cursor hits. Now what we want to do is to cut out this walkway so that we can use that. So we're going to do the same thing. Make sure you're on the background layer. You're going to use the polygonal lasso tool, and this should be relatively easy because it's a straight line. So we're going to cut out, let's just cut out the entire dock. We don't know if we're going to need it. No, we don't need all of the dock, so I'm just going to cut out just the top part for now. Doesn't matter that I've cut this in half there, because we're not going to need it just yet. Now once we do that, we're going to now do the same thing. We're going to copy, and then we are going to place in place. So we're going to call this new layer that we've just cut out, and we're going to call this dock. And let's turn on back our layers now, and we're going to put the dock layer in front of the reflection layer. Right, there we go. All right, so now we're getting somewhere. Now next, what we want to do is definitely turn down the opacity of our reflection layer. So we're going to go to opacity, and we're going to kind of turn that down. So it's kind of looking like that. There we go. And next, we want to probably add some wrinkles to the reflection. So to do that, we're going to, on our reflection layer, we're going to go to filter, and there should be some interesting filters that we can use to get some wrinkles. So if under filters we look under distort, here we have ocean ripples, we have ripple. Let's try ocean ripple. Let's see what that looks like. And we just want to wait for that to come up. There we go. So we should get a preview of what that should look like, and we can actually maximize this. And let's zoom out by clicking this button here. Alright, and we can actually mess with this. We can make the ripple size bigger, and we can change the ripple magnitude. You know, let's see how that looks. There we go. So that's looking a bit more nicer. Next, what we want to do is to kind of get rid of this hard edge here. It's not looking too realistic. So to do that, we're going to go on the assignment 1 comp layer, and we can know that's it by turning it off and on. And let's just use the eraser tool. The eraser tool is here. And no, that's not the eraser tool. There we go. And what we're going to do, let's make that brush. So we're going to edit the brush size up top. So we're going to make that brush size way smaller. We're going to let the hardness be all the way to 0 because we want it to be soft. And oh, we're going to also adjust, in my case the flow needs to be 100%. Let's make that brush a little bigger, and we're going to kind of erase some of these hard lines here. There we go. All right. Right, so now it looks a bit more like it's coming out of the water. All right, great. So more things are happening. Now, we could also put some reflections in the mirror. And to do that, what we want to do is let's create a new, we're going to go on the background layer. And we're going to actually use the polygonal lasso tool. And we're going to cut where the glass is. So let's turn off our boat for a while. All right, good. Now we just need to cut where the glass is. And what we're going to do is we're not actually going to cut out the glass. So that was the first one. I want to cut the second one, so I'm going to start another lasso cut here by holding shift. Notice when I press shift, I get the plus button. So I want to hold shift, and then I want to start with the lasso tool again. So I have 2 selections. Now here is the important thing. I want to cut out a section of the background to use in my reflection. So listen, look carefully. I'm going to actually drag this and I'm going to put it somewhere over here. And the idea is I want to cut out this section of the image and then use it as my background. So let's do that. So I'm on my background layer, and I'm actually going to cut this out by doing Control C. And then I'm going to do Control V. Now I don't have to do paste in place. No, I can just paste it pretty much anywhere. And I think it's actually pasted in place. Let me turn off the background. There it is. And I'm going to call this layer Reflection Glass. And I'm going to use my move tool, and I'm going to just now move that into place here. Oh, this needs to be on the top layer, so I'm going to put this all the way up top. And I'm going to try and just snap this in here. There we go. All right, now that's looking like a reflection, though it's not realistic, but you know, it can pass. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to distort this a little bit, so we're going to make the opacity and carry it all the way down, so you just barely see it there. There we go. Let's carry it down even further. There we go. So now it's kind of mixed. As a matter of fact, another thing we can try to do is we can change the blending mode. So let's try one of these. Let's try screen, and then take the opacity down. I think we get pretty much the same effect. It's almost the same effect. Almost the same effect. All right. So there goes our reflections. Now, when most of this stuff is done, you want to do, because you're in Photoshop, it's a good idea to do some kind of color correction that will help the picture to more blend nicely. So what we're going to do is we're going to create what's called an adjustment layer. Now to do that, that's a whole new panel. So we're going to go to Window. We're going to go to Adjustments, and that will open up our adjustment layer. Now the type of adjustment we want to use is going to be, let's use a photo filter. So we're going to click that. And notice what happens. There is actually a new layer that has appeared here. And what this layer is doing is that it is affecting all these other layers below it by applying a photo filter of orange. So it's kind of adding an orange tinge to everything. Now that maybe orange is not quite your flavor, you can, there are actually some presets here. So I did a warming, and there are different types of warming. There we go. Now the great thing about adding an adjustment layer is that it is indeed an adjustment. So if I turn it off, you're back to the original image. So you aren't modifying these pieces, but instead you're adding an adjustment on top. So I'm going to add another adjustment layer. I'm going to add hue and saturation, and this is what that looks like. Now notice again that another adjustment layer has appeared, so therefore this is going to apply on top of this, and then that is going to apply to everything below. So you can actually layer adjustment layers upon adjustment layers upon adjustment layers. So for this adjustment layer, this I would probably want to beef up the saturation, you know, to get that water pumping. Not too high though, it's gonna look weird. So just a little. There we go. And that's it. And let's add a last adjustment layer. So this process, what we're doing is called color correction. All right, so we're doing some, or color grading. We're actually manipulating the colors of the entire composition. So we're gonna go to now brightness and contrast, and we're gonna just kind of brighten the image just a little and add a little contrast, not too much, but just a little to let it be interesting. There we go. Now you can add your own kind of look and feel to this, but pretty much that is what is required. Now we're gonna need an entourage. In this case, we kind of use this boat as an entourage, but for those of you who might choose a different image, you might have to cut out your own image of a boat. You can use Entourage from the internet. You don't have to use the Entourage that's provided, but you do have to use the backgrounds that are provided, right? So pretty much once it's done, we are going to save your file. We should actually have been saving as we went along, but anyway, we're actually going to save our files now, and that will be the end of this tutorial.